Emily, last time you and I spoke, it was just a few days before the state signed the hands-free law. So how have things been so far?
Well, the pandemic, like for everybody, it's made some really big changes in everybody's lives. So, right, we spoke in February. At that point, the media coverage of the hands-free law was amazing. We were really hopeful that it would go smoothly. We already saw drivers' behavior changing, and really people were putting the phones down. And then the pandemic hit, and that took over, rightfully, took over everything, and enforcement couldn't happen to keep everybody safe. And I was actually ready to just take a little step back and relax, because there were no cars on the road, or very few cars on the road in the first couple of weeks in mid-March, early April. But then, unfortunately, we saw that with the empty roads came excessive speeding. So it wasn't this problem of distracted driving. It was a problem of really dangerous speeds, of cars going over 100 miles an hour on the highway, speeding on rural roads. And unfortunately, what we saw was the fatality rate for April doubled what it was last April in 2019. So what all our traffic safety advocates were hoping, that we would see a huge drop in traffic crashes, unfortunately wasn't the case. So it's been really frustrating and really sad. And one of the main messages that we're trying to send to drivers is, don't stress the system. Healthcare workers and first responders, they are busy with COVID. And now I think we're in a lull. Hopefully we'll remain in this good place for a while with COVID. But we still don't want to stress the system. People are still needing to go to the hospital for health reasons. Doctors and nurses are still needing to focus on everybody else in the hospital. They do not want to see new people because of an entirely preventable traffic crash.
Absolutely. And it is not recommended right now to visit those emergency rooms. And as you said, that at least things are getting a little better, but there's this high anxiety in visiting a hospital or emergency room at this time. So that is sad, I would think, because we were all staying in place. Although the gas prices dropped significantly, I would think that you had seen some improvement on the road, maybe some ideas to how you could even implement, once everything comes back, you could reinforce the hands-free law.
Right. Well, that's where we're grateful to be speaking with you today, because just ahead of July 4th, we are expecting people to be on the road and going on vacation or going on a day trip. And we really just want to make it clear, not only should people put down the phone and really focus on the road, but also be mindful of your speed. Be mindful, absolutely. If you are drinking, if you're planning to drink, plan ahead, have a designated driver, or come up with a plan, because there should be no excuse to be impaired while driving. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was, with the pandemic and social distancing, there are a lot more people out walking and biking. And if you have a narrow sidewalk in your town, a lot of runners and walkers are forced to go into the street to keep a safe distance from the people they're sharing the sidewalk with. So a big message that we and other transportation advocates are trying to spread is, we have to share the streets. For drivers, you have to expect that there are going to be other road users in the road with you, whether it's people out on their bikes or out walking. We're all just trying to get fresh air, get some exercise, and get a little sanity break. And so it's that really important reminder to share the road.
Very good, very good. So you said that when the pandemic hit, you took a step back and tried to see what kind of impact that would have on road safety. But before the pandemic, do you feel that the law was properly reinforced, or what type of challenges did you face? I spoke to my police chief in Wareham, and they talked about that they felt they didn't have the proper technology to reinforce or determine if somebody was using their cell phone or not. What challenges did you see or did you hear about?
I mean, what I heard was really good education, really good awareness. And, EOPS had, I don't know if it was part of their slogan that was posted all over highways, but it was police yourself so we don't have to. Mm-hmm. And I think now that is more important than it ever has been, with, Black Lives Matter movement and with calls to defund and reform the police. I think it is so important for us to take responsibility for our own driving and say, right, I need to be responsible. So instead of relying on enforcement in this time when, the pandemic is still at play, enforcement, I think, is still going to be down for a little bit. Drivers have to take that on themselves. And whether the driver wants to do it or give their kid the job of being that policeman or police girl in the back seat, kids can speak up and tell their parents, I see you on your phone. That makes me scared. I'll text for you. Or, they might notice their parents about to drive through a yellow or red light. So it's giving the kid in the back seat or your passenger the power to help keep everybody safe in the car. So I think before the pandemic, we were seeing people enforcing themselves and not using the phone. So our hope is that we can continue that trend. Again, by just educating, putting the message out there, leave the phone alone. It's only hands-free.
Absolutely. And I think even law enforcement and everybody needs to have a reminder that this law does accompany some fines out there if you got caught. I believe it's up to $500 in fines if you got caught for a third offense using your phone. I think the pandemic has stalled everything or put everything on pause. So people need to be reminded that we did pass this law and this law is active, and just watch out.
Right, exactly.
Have you learned anything you feel from the pandemic? Maybe a way of campaigning, things that you're going to implement even after the pandemic?
Well, I like that question, and I was thinking about it, and I feel with the pandemic, there have been all these really supportive and community-minded phrases like we're in this together or 6 feet together. And I feel like those are phrases we need to bring to the road too. Because when you think about sharing this relatively tight space with drivers, with passengers in the cars, with bicyclists, motorcyclists, pedestrians, all these vulnerable road users, we have to be respectful. We have to recognize that we're sharing the road with precious lives. And we're all just trying to get from point A to point B. And if we start bringing more empathy, just like we're trying to bring empathy to everybody during this pandemic, because the entire world has all been impacted. So I think that's one beautiful thing that I try to recognize. We are trying to all be in this together, even though many people have been impacted at such varying degrees. But if we can bring that message back to the road, I think that's something that is really important to recognize. We are all just sharing the space and we need to respect it and each other.
Absolutely. On the website, you have a program called the Parents Supervised Driving Program. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this is a program we've been running since 2011, and it's geared towards parents of teen drivers. So we're in 26 states, I believe, across the country. And when a teen is about to get their permit or passes their permit test, they should be given this guidebook. And it's a printed, like magazine-style guidebook, but it's also online. We also have an app called Road Ready, which logs your hours that you're required to meet to get your license.
Mm.
But it's basically, it's a guide for parents. It's an add-on to Driver's Ed. So it's not in replacement of anything. It's just to help parents and guardians teach their teen how to drive. Because a lot of research was coming out like in the early to mid 2000s, showing that when adults and parents and guardians are involved in their teens driving and learning to drive process, the less likely that teen is to get in a crash later on. So it's, the more hours you put behind the wheel with your teen, and the more involved you are, as well as modeling that good driving behavior, the better it is. So we created this program, and it's still going strong. And even though teens weren't able to get their permits, in March and April, we've been working closely with R&D in Massachusetts to see how can we still get this guidebook into parents' hands. So the R&D should still be handing this out when teens are coming in for the in-person appointment.
Very good. And at last, do you have the Safe Road Alliance have any programs coming up that we should be paying attention to?
So that's the other frustrating part with the pandemic. We were ready to launch a program in schools. We partnered with an organization called NDD.org, and they've been giving presentations to high school students for almost a decade. And the founder, Joel Feldman, and I worked really closely to develop a program for elementary students, so they could speak up in the backseat and feel empowered, be respectful, but feel empowered to remind their driver to focus on the road. So with schools closed, we were ready to bring it into one or two schools in April. So now with schools closed, we're trying to figure out how can we still give this information as an option for teachers, while we're not really sure where schools are going to be in the fall. And then the other thing we're doing is we're developing a course, so with the hands-free law, written into the law was the requirement that if a driver gets a second offense, that not only will the fine go up to $250, but you'll also have to take a driver attitude adjustment class. Wow. That's given by the R&B, so that's already in place. But for judges and DAs, we're designing a class that would be similar but different in a way. We want it to be in person because we think in-person education is so much better than online. So we're going to design it both for online learning now that we have COVID in our lives, but also in person once it's safe to do so. So that if a driver does cause a crash, if a driver hits 3 offenses in a short period of time, this will be a resource that judges and DAs can use. So we're going to try to launch that in Middlesex County, hopefully in September, October, and then we'll kind of see how that goes, if we can spread that out wider.
Absolutely. I cannot thank you enough for the noble work that you're doing. Work that seems very common sense, but yet we are struggling with it. Right. So that's the perfect fact. But
it's slow, but we'll get there.
Absolutely.
It's just very slow.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. Would you like to add anything that I didn't ask?
No, if anybody wants to check out our website, it's just saferoadsalliance.org, and anybody's able to email me anytime with questions regarding distracted driving, or any kind of road safety tips as well. So thank you so much for this interview and this possibility, and we just hope that people stay safe on the road, both for July 4th weekend, but every day. I mean, summer is a really hard time, especially for teens. It actually is known as the 100 deadliest days between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So our hope is that, everybody really just stays mindful and slows down.
Well, I wish you a wonderful day, and I hope, I believe that this interview is going to reinforce that switch in our minds to pay attention.